Welcome back from the break. You're watching NewsX and I'm Asafri Jindal. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Evian, France, where he will attend the G7 summit, joining global leaders for high-level discussions on major international issues, including global economy stability, energy security and sustainable development. In a post on social media, the Prime Minister said, reached Evian, France for the G7 summit, looking forward to engaging with world leaders and exchanging views on key global issues. India remains committed to advancing collective efforts for a more sustainable and prosperous planet. At the summit, Prime Minister Modi is expected to underline India's commitment to global cooperation and highlight the country's priorities on climate action, resilient supply chains and inclusive growth. Let me go across to Megha Sharma, Senior Executive Editor, joining us at this point in time. Megha, if you can hear me, what more details can you share with us at this point in time?
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just arrived at Evian. He has been received in a grand welcome. He is very soon going to be meeting Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and the other members of the G7 grouping. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was first in Geneva. Of course, he flew from Bratislava to Geneva, where he was received by the president of Switzerland, Guy Parmelin. And from Geneva, he has taken a tour all the way to Evian, and he is very soon, like I said, going to be welcomed by Emmanuel Macron, the French president, who is also hosting the G7 summit. Amongst the top engagements for the Prime Minister for the second day of the G7 summit are the bilateral that is going to happen on the sidelines with the UK, the UAE and the Canadian heads of governments. So those are the key engagements that the Prime Minister will be participating in. Besides that, there is going to be a G7 meeting, in fact the G7 plus nation sets of governments, which is going to of course include Prime Minister Modi from India, Kenya, and you talk about and South Korea, Brazil. These all are the countries that form G7. So those will be the key aspects of day 2 of G7 summit. I do want to mention specifically about the importance of these bilaterals that the Prime Minister is going to hold with his UK counterpart, Keir Starmer. We already know that there is a free trade agreement that has been signed between two nations. Last year, Keir Starmer was in India with 100+ delegation from businessmen, from educational institutions, academia, AI innovators. They all were present in India to build on the India-UK 2030 roadmap. So that is going to be essentially the conversation that's expected to revolve around when both the leaders speak to each other on the sidelines. Besides that, the UAE President Al Nahyan is also over here. He was in just a short while welcomed. He is now in Evian. So is the Canadian Prime Minister, who of course came in with his wife and was welcomed by the French president. And UAE is one country where Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made a large number of visits. The very recent one was just a few weeks ago when he was in UAE. There were a number of these agreements that were signed. Key amongst them was the Defense Strategic Partnership, talking about the oil and energy partnership as well as space, and a sector that India and UAE are exploring very rapidly. When it comes to Canada, where he is going to be meeting Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, again, an FTA is something that is on the anvil. CEPA, as it's called, Canada is at this point in time seeking more inroads into India when it comes to investment and trade, and India has welcomed Canadian leadership to move forward in forging these trade ties. There have been announcements to that effect that have been made by Piyush Goyal, the Commerce Minister, who has spoken time and again about the early conclusion of the free trade agreement, the CEPA, between India and Canada by the end of 2026. So all of these activities these engagements are going to be the center of attention for the world and particularly for India.
Right, absolutely. Megha, I also want to understand from you, before I come to Megha, of course, these are live visuals that we're tracking very closely, where, of course, you can see Emmanuel Macron there sitting right next to US President Donald Trump. These are live visuals that we are tracking from the venue, the G7 summit venue in Evian. So, like I said, world leaders meeting one another, major decisions expected to take place, and those are the visuals that we're tracking right now from Evian, France, where you can see, of course, world leaders interacting with each other. Donald Trump right now having a conversation there with Emmanuel Macron, also in the same speech. So as you can see, the round table over there and the conference and the deliberations that are expected to take place. All right, Megha continues to be with us on the broadcast. Megha, I want to understand from you, we've just seen the visuals of Donald Trump, and something that is really what the world and what India is truly watching out for is Prime Minister Modi meeting Donald Trump. What more can you tell us on that front?
Yes, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is going to be staying back for the G7 summit tomorrow as well, which is the third and the final day. And key amongst the engagements that the Prime Minister will be part of is that very important and closely watched bilateral meeting with US President Donald Trump. Again, on the agenda is the bilateral trade. Yeah, so of course, the big talk with regards to the conversation that is expected between both the leaders is the bilateral trade agreement that is, there has no decision per se, there is no conclusion that has taken place. So far, there have been, of course, trade representatives from India and from American side that have been coming to each other's countries. Momentum is very rapidly building, especially in the last few weeks. There has been a very positive narrative that has been built by US President Donald Trump after a lot of upheavals that were seen in this bilateral relationship between India and United States of America. That obviously was a cause of concern. Main causes for this souring of ties, if one may call it, was of course when the Pahalgam terror attack happened and subsequently the Indian military operation against Pakistan, where Donald Trump was largely seen siding with the Pakistani leadership and also going ahead and taking credit for the ceasefire that was negotiated between Pakistan and India. Besides that, the huge tariffs that had initially been imposed by the Trump administration on India did not sit well with the Indian leadership. Since then, these tariffs have been lifted because of the US Supreme Court order calling it unilateral and unwarranted. But I think that is going to be the number one focus for Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump. But I would like to, shed more light into what is happening right now at the G7 summit. In fact, President Donald Trump has now held, at this point of time, holding a bilateral meeting with his Qatari counterpart and the Emir of Qatar and President Donald Trump are talking about, of course, the global oil crisis, even as we see that the crude has dropped. The prices of crude have dropped to a three-month low. The markets at this point of time are, improving in the last 48 to 72 hours ever since that peace deal was announced by US President Donald Trump. But there has been another briefing, in fact, that the President Trump has had. He has spoken to the media while he was sitting with the Emir of Qatar. This was right before both of them headed for their bilateral meeting, and he has brought the focus back on the Ukraine-Russia war. That is perhaps the big news of G7 over here after the West Asia crisis that seemingly has ended. As US President Donald Trump puts it, he says the deal is done. We do not really know until Friday that the memorandum is actually going to be signed. But the G7 leaders, whether it is France or UK or Italy, Germany, and particularly United States of America, they are bringing the focus back on Ukraine and Russia, which had been in the back burner. The president, in fact, went on and said that he has been in touch with the Russian leadership. He said that he had a phone call with the Russian president, and he is going to move forward to ensure that there is everlasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. He's also going to be meeting Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who has been called for the G7 summit for the 4th time running now.
All right, Megha, thank you for sharing all those details with us. In fact, joining us at this point in time is Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta. He's with us on the broadcast. So thank you for your time speaking to us on NewsX. And I'd like to understand from you, what exactly does India bring to the table at G7? What are India's big agendas? What is important to India as far as G7 is concerned?
Good afternoon to everyone. You see, this is a very important forum in the world. G20, I would call it the most important. G7, after that, the second most important forum in the world. All the principal leaders in the world are represented in this meeting. And India has been a permanent observer. Last time it was in Canada, where Prime Minister Modi was invited. And this is again now in France, and the Prime Minister Modi had the privilege of getting invitation for this summit. Now, this summit practically discusses, all the important developments in the world, whether they are in political sphere, whether they are in economic sphere, whether they are in, strategic aspect. So, in this summit, I have a feeling that the maximum time would be spent on the conflict between Iran and US and the proposed deal between the two countries. Now, whether the deal has been signed or not, the consequences of that deal will come up. Also, the energy security issue will come up. And the conflict between Ukraine and Russia will come up. These are issues which are of very significant importance to us. The position of China in the globe, and particularly the increasing influence of China, will definitely come up. And these are directly impacting on our national security, on our economic security, as well as on our strategic, position in the world. Therefore, our, presence at this summit is going to tremendously help us to project our views. We will be observer, but we are in a position to project our views to various summit leaders. And as you know, France is the host this time, and we have a very special, close relationship with France. We are actually going to produce Rafale in India in the coming years. And we have been a great strategic partner with France for years. Therefore, this is a very, very significant, meeting. It will give us an overall perspective of the strategic position in the world and what India can do and how India can contribute to make it better, to make it secure for India, and to preserve our own national interest in every sphere, whether it's economic or strategic or, defense related. So this is how I look at it.
Right, absolutely. I request you to stay on with us. We have some more breaking news coming in as far as the G7 is concerned. French President Emmanuel Macron has welcomed several world leaders as they arrive for high-level diplomatic engagements, including Ukrainian President Zelensky, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The French president personally received the leaders, highlighting France's role in facilitating dialogue among key global partners at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions. Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta continues to be with us on the broadcast. Sir, of course, we have the visuals on our screens of what's taking place in Evian, France right now. How do you essentially view what Emmanuel Macron is doing? The earlier dialogue that he had with Prime Minister Modi, he said that there's a shared vision with India to grow, and he also spoke about how India and France have bolstering ties. Now, of course, we're seeing that he's welcomed world leaders. We're talking about Zelensky, we're talking about the Egyptian president, as well as the UAE president. How do you view the way he's navigating through G7?
These are very, very significant, symbolic presence, because Zelensky has been invited to discuss the issue between Ukraine and Russia and how the war can now be stopped. Now it's almost 4.5 years the war has been going on, and it is important that it stops, because it is not only loss of life, it is loss of supply chain, particularly the oil supply chain from Russia, and there is a fertilizer and grain supply chain from Ukraine. So all these things have been affected. The Europe has suffered a lot. There has been tremendous inflation in Europe because of these problems. And there is also scarcity of energy supply in Europe. So all these are very significant, and I think they will try to find a way out to how to stop the Ukraine war. The presence of UAE president is very significant, because UAE has taken a very different approach in the recent years. There has been open conflict between Saudi Arabia and UAE. UAE wants that, they have also left what we call OPEC. And UAE wants closer relationship with the, democracies in the world, because it's a very open society, and it does not want to follow the route of Saudi Arabia. So this is going to change the equation in the Gulf region, which is very important. Gulf region is supplier of about 40 to 50% of energy to the world. And now we have seen the significance of that route, and therefore presence of UAE president is extremely significant how the new equation in the Gulf will emerge. We are going to see tremendous changes in the Gulf region in the coming years, because the proposed agreement with Iran is also very significant. This agreement, this conflict and the agreement is going to raise the status of Iran tremendously, which is not in the global interest. Because Iran is a fundamentalist society, it is a society which represses the right of women. It is also a very, close society, and wants to control the entire Gulf region and the oil supply to the world. And therefore, my view is that all these aspects will come up during the summit, how they will be addressed, and will it play an impact on the proposed agreement with Iran. I don't know how it will happen, because whatever the 14-point formula, some leaks have come out on the agreement. If those are true, obviously Iran will gain a significant hold on the region, and UAE president's presence will certainly enable the summit leaders to analyze that aspect and to discuss this aspect. Because Iran has been in this process for years. They wanted to control the energy supply from the Gulf. They wanted complete control of the Gulf region, including the countries like Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and the Gulf GCC states.